Picture this. You walk into an Apple store today.
Eh?
It's the exact same sleek, minimalist temple of technology it was last month. You walk over to those massive, pristine wooden tables, and there's a MacBook sitting there on the display shelf.
Right, the usual setup.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's got that exact same silver body, the exact same razor-sharp screen, that same glowing logo on the back. You look at the keyboard, same layout.
Nothing looks out of place.
Nothing. But then your eyes drift down. You look at the little acrylic sign sitting next to it, and the price tag has changed. It is higher.
Significantly higher, actually. And, if you ask a sales rep why, they probably won't give you the real answer.
No, of course not.
Because the real answer has absolutely nothing to do with Apple's design cycle or, like, a flashy new feature.
Exactly. And this is where the story gets incredibly cinematic. Because that price hike, it is not because Apple dropped a radical new chassis design.
Right.
There is no breakthrough keyboard hidden under there. There's no magical new camera upgrade. There's not some, killer new feature that Tim Cook wrapped up in a glossy keynote presentation.
The device itself hasn't changed at all.
Not one bit. What changed is the invisible raw material inside it. It's memory.
Wow, yeah.
It's a silent, entirely invisible ripple effect. Because somewhere far, far away from that pristine, air-conditioned Apple store, out in the heat and the blinding hum of the global AI build-out, massive industrial data centers are swallowing up the memory chips that used to sit quietly inside our consumer laptops.
It's the exact moment where an abstract technological concept becomes intensely physical.
Right.
The last couple of years, the AI boom has been this, massive planetary scale infrastructure project. It's reshaped power grids. It's redesigned commercial liquid cooling systems.
Which is wild in itself.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah.
It's monopolized chip foundries halfway across the world, and it has absolutely rewritten Wall Street balance sheets. But this week
was different.
it crossed a threshold. It officially reached the consumer aisle.
The AI empire has receipts now. And those receipts are literally showing up on the shelves of the stores you walk into. So, welcome. This is Silicon Drama by eTatos.com.
That's right.
Silicon Drama is not a normal tech news recap. It is a weekly power drama about AI, humanoid robots, big tech, chips, compute, agents, CEOs, and the people fighting for influence over the future.
And our mission for you on this deep dive is to decode the power struggles of the week.
Yeah.
We are going to focus on the people first, the company second, and we are going to reveal exactly how the AI supply chain is literally rewriting the rules of the physical world.
Exactly. If you've been watching the tech sector and feeling like the tectonic plates are shifting in ways that don't make immediate sense, well, this is where we map out exactly who is pulling the levers.
We have a massive stack of sources to get through today. We're looking at supply chain leaks, Wall Street bond issuance filings.
Physical hardware teardowns, too.
Right. Physical teardowns, cybersecurity threat assessments, and massive corporate acquisitions. And the core question driving all of this week's drama is actually remarkably simple.
How do you control an empire that is getting this ridiculously, unfathomably expensive?
It's the trillion-dollar question, truly,
Yeah.
because the scale of capital required to stay relevant in artificial intelligence right now is breaking historical precedents.
It really is. And the answer to that question seems to be, you have to start building your own raw materials. You have to own the foundation.
You have to.
So looking at the hierarchy of influence this week, we have to start with Sam Altman and OpenAI, who have vaulted back to the very top of the board.
Big moves from them.
And they didn't do it by launching a new chatbot. They did it by unveiling a piece of physical metal.
Right. They unveiled their first custom-designed silicon. It's a chip codenamed Jalapeño. Jalapeño. Yeah. Which, honestly, purely on a branding level, is a fantastic departure from the usual hyper-serious tech acronyms.
It's great. It's spicy. But hold on, let's unpack this for a second.
Right.
OpenAI is a software company.
Correct.
They're a research lab. Their entire mythos for years has been that intelligence just arrives through a clean, simple text box on your screen. You type a prompt, magic happens, you get an answer.
Right, the friction is gone.
Exactly. So why on earth is a software research lab suddenly getting into the brutal, low-margin, incredibly difficult hardware business? Are they actually trying to manufacture their own physical chips?
Not manufacture, no. And that is a critical distinction to make.
Okay.
They aren't building a $30 billion fabrication plant like TSMC. They are designing the logic of the chips.
Right.
So Jalapeño was designed in partnership with Broadcom, and it's being physically integrated into server racks by a company called Celestica. But to understand why Sam Altman is taking OpenAI down this path, why he feels compelled to engineer custom hardware, you really have to understand the fundamental economics of how AI actually operates on a daily basis.
Yeah, the daily grind of it.
You have to separate training from inference.
Okay, let's go deep on this. Because I think people hear the word compute and they just, lump it all into one giant bucket of expensive computers.
Yeah, they do.
But training and inference are almost two entirely different industries at this point. I like to think about this like a massive high-end restaurant operation.
Oh, I like this analogy.
Right. So the training phase, which is the phase where NVIDIA absolutely dominates the entire world right now. That is your massive, multi-million-dollar industrial test kitchen.
Exactly. It's the R&D lab.
Right. It takes an ocean of data, months of uninterrupted time, and unbelievable amounts of electrical power just to invent the menu, to create the recipes from scratch.
The chefs are in there just throwing millions of ingredients against the wall, figuring out the precise mathematical weights and balances of a neural network.
Yes. That's training a frontier model like GPT-4 or GPT-5. It is a massive, fixed upfront cost.
And it gets all the glory, too. I mean, the training runs are what make the headlines. When a CEO brags about securing a cluster of 100,000 GPUs, they are bragging about their test kitchen.
Right. Those are the myth-making events of the AI industry.
But once the menu is finalized, the restaurant actually has to open to the public. And that is inference.
Yes.
Inference is what Jalapeño is built for. Inference, the army of line cooks making the actual meals to order every single day, millions of times a second.
Yeah, it's the daily grind.
Every single time you open the app on your phone and ask a question, every time an autonomous agent plans a multi-step task in the background, every time a system writes code or summarizes a legal document, that is an inference event. The training gets the myth, but the inference gets the bill.
And that bill is compounding at a terrifying rate. This is where you really see the financial pressure on OpenAI.
Tell me about it.
Think about how the nature of AI usage is changing. We are moving away from simple, single-turn chatbots. You don't just ask for a recipe anymore.
No, you want it to do the grocery shopping, too.
Right. We are moving toward agentic workflows. You ask the AI to research a topic, write a report, cross-reference it against a database, and email it to your team, which is incredibly complex under the hood.
Exactly. Under the hood, that single request might trigger dozens or hundreds of hidden inference calls. The model is reasoning, planning, checking its own work, and correcting its mistakes before it ever shows you a final output.
So the volume of compute required per user is just skyrocketing.
Exponentially.
Yeah.
Every retry, every long context request where you upload a massive PDF, every hidden planning loop, it all becomes part of this massive machine economy.
Wow.
Every prompt costs a fraction of a cent, but when you multiply that by hundreds of millions of daily users, the numbers become catastrophic. OpenAI is looking at this Mac and realizing a very dangerous truth. If they rely entirely on outside vendors for inference compute, they are essentially renting away their own future.
Because right now, they are paying a premium to whoever owns the metal.
Exactly.
NVIDIA controls the training hardware and takes massive margins. Microsoft controls the cloud infrastructure layer and takes their cut. So OpenAI is trying to move deeper into the stack, into the actual silicon, so they don't get squeezed to death by the very infrastructure they rely on.
You have to own it.
Right. If you own the inference chip, you control your own destiny when it comes to operating costs.
Precisely. And this is where the Broadcom partnership comes in. Broadcom specializes in this kind of highly specific custom silicon.
Right.
A general-purpose NVIDIA GPU is incredible at doing a million different mathematical operations simultaneously, which is why it's great for training. But an inference chip like Jalapeño doesn't need to learn anything new.
It just executes.
It just needs to execute a fully trained model as fast and as cheaply as physically possible. You strip away all the silicon you don't need, you optimize the memory bandwidth strictly for serving tokens, and suddenly the cost of serving ChatGPT to a user drops dramatically.
I have to ask, though, is there a bit of Google envy happening here with Sam Altman?
Oh, I think Google envy is exactly the right term. Look at Google's historical position in this space. Long before the rest of the industry fully grasped what custom AI silicon would mean, Google had TPUs, tensor processing units.
Yeah, they were way ahead on that.
Google understood vertical integration. They owned the entire stack from the very beginning. They owned the consumer search interface, the massive ad network to monetize it, the Android operating system to distribute it.
The global cloud infrastructure to host it.
Right, the foundational AI models and the physical custom chips those models ran on.
They owned the full vertical slice.
They did. They might have been historically slow to ship the actual consumer chatbot interface. I mean, they let OpenAI beat them to the punch with ChatGPT, but Google was incredibly deep in the machine room.
They weren't renting?
Exactly. They weren't paying a middleman for compute. OpenAI is looking at Google's structural advantage and realizing they have to replicate it. They have to build that depth.
But they are trying to do it at breakneck speed. And look, Jalapeño isn't a final victory. We don't even have independent benchmarks yet to see how it actually stacks up against NVIDIA's latest generation or Google's custom accelerators in the real world.
No, we don't.
But from a narrative perspective, the strategic intent is what matters here. Sam Altman is signaling to the market that he isn't just a model builder anymore. He is trying to build the physical floor those models run on.
Which brings us directly to the guy who currently owns that floor. The man whose hardware everyone is trying to build an alternative to, Jensen Huang, the CEO of NVIDIA.
Right. Jensen is holding steady right at the top of the influence hierarchy this week. And what NVIDIA did over the last few days fundamentally shifts the entire tone of the AI boom.
It really does.
I really want to dig into this because on the surface, it almost sounds contradictory. NVIDIA, a company that is practically printing money right now, raised $25 billion in a U.S. bond sale. It is their first corporate bond issuance since 2021. And Wall Street demand was so heavy, so voracious, that they actually expanded the deal beyond their initial plan.
This is a massive financial maneuver, and it's important to understand why a company with NVIDIA's cash flow does this.
That's exactly where I'm stuck. Let me push back on this.
Sure.
NVIDIA stock has been on a historic, unprecedented tear. They are the most valuable or, second most valuable company on the planet, depending on the day of the week.
Right.
They have incredible margins. Their customers are literally lining up, begging to give them cash for GPUs. Why on earth do they need to go to Wall Street and borrow $25 billion? That doesn't make sense to a layperson. If you're rich, you don't take out a loan.
It's counterintuitive, I know, but it's a classic signal of maturity in capital markets. First, think about the cost of capital. Yes, NVIDIA's stock price is sky high. They could issue new shares to raise money.
But that dilutes it.
Exactly. Issuing equity dilutes the existing shareholders. It essentially slices the pie into smaller pieces. Debt, on the other hand, especially for a company with a pristine gold-plated balance sheet like NVIDIA, is incredibly cheap.
Oh, okay.
Institutional investors, pension funds, massive asset managers, they want safe, reliable yield. They look at NVIDIA and see the closest thing to a guaranteed return in the tech sector. So NVIDIA can borrow that $25 billion at very attractive interest rates.
So it's cheap money, but what do they actually need the money for?
They need it because the physical scale of what they are building is expanding beyond normal corporate constraints.
Okay.
The AI story started as this kind of software magic narrative. Then, about a year ago, it matured into a panic about chip shortages, everyone fighting over TSMC allocation.
Oh, yeah, the great GPU panic.
Right. Then it became this frantic data center land rush where hyperscalers were fighting over real estate and power contracts. But now, it's transitioned into sovereign-level infrastructure finance.
That phrase right there.
Yes.
Sovereign-level infrastructure. That is the key.
Exactly. Jensen Huang is acting less like a traditional tech CEO pitching a software product and more like a sovereign borrower. He is financing the critical infrastructure of a small nation.
Wow.
The next generation of AI hardware systems, like their upcoming Blackwell architecture and beyond, requires massive capital expenditures. You aren't just designing a chip. You are funding the entire global supply chain required to build it.
So it's the factories, the packaging.
Yes. You are fronting the cash for advanced packaging facilities, specialized memory production, and the massive liquid cooling infrastructure that these new racks demand.
So NVIDIA isn't struggling to make payroll. They're using the bond market to pull the future forward. They're securing $25 billion today so they can lock down the physical supply chain of tomorrow, effectively boxing out any competitors who can't secure that kind of financing.
That's the competitive moat right there. If you are a startup trying to challenge NVIDIA, you might be able to design a clever chip architecture. But can you go to Wall Street and raise a $25 billion war chest to secure factory capacity? No. The bond market just voted, and they voted to crown NVIDIA as the foundational utility of the AI era.
He's financing an empire.
Right.
The hyperscalers like Microsoft and Amazon are pouring the concrete, the foundries are baking the silicon. But at this scale, the empire needs credit. It needs the safest-looking debt in the tech sector to lubricate the gears. And NVIDIA just proved they have unquestioned access to it.
Yeah, they really did.
But while Jensen is financing the empire from the top down, there is a new player entering the board who's trying to crack NVIDIA's moat from the inside out. And this brings us to Cristiano Amon, the CEO of Qualcomm.
Yes, Qualcomm made a massive entrance into the drama this week. For those who don't know, Qualcomm is historically dominant in mobile chips, the processors inside your smartphone.
Right.
But they want a piece of the AI data center market. And this week they agreed to buy a software company called Modular for nearly $4 billion.
$4 billion for a company most people have never heard of.
Yeah.
But this acquisition is a direct, calculated attack on what the industry calls CUDA.
Which is the true source of NVIDIA's power. Everyone focuses on the physical GPUs, but CUDA is the invisible moat. It is the software platform, the programming interface that lets developers actually talk to NVIDIA's hardware.
Let's break down why this is so notoriously difficult to overcome. I've heard people compare CUDA to a paved road system.
Okay.
It's like NVIDIA built the only paved road system in a massive, sprawling city. And if you want to buy a cheaper car from a competitor like Qualcomm, you can't drive it because it's not allowed on NVIDIA's roads. Is that a fair way to look at it?
It's a decent starting point, but it actually understates how deep the lock-in is.
Yeah.
It's not just that NVIDIA built the roads. It's more like NVIDIA forces you to use their specific brand of cars. You have to hire drivers who only speak NVIDIA's language, and you have to obey a set of traffic laws that literally no one else uses.
Oh, wow.
Right. If you buy a cheaper AI chip from Qualcomm or AMD, you suddenly have to build your own roads, train your own drivers, and invent traffic laws entirely from scratch.
Okay, that clarifies the pain point immensely. So from a developer's perspective, if I've spent the last 10 years writing millions of lines of custom C++ code and specialized math libraries that rely exclusively on CUDA, I mean, I don't want to throw all that away just to save a few bucks on a competitor's hardware.
Exactly.
The switching costs are astronomical.
Rewriting that code is a nightmare. It takes years, it introduces bugs, and it completely derails your product roadmap. So developers just throw their hands up and say, just buy the NVIDIA GPUs. It's too expensive to switch.
Yeah.
That is the CUDA moat. It's a software monopoly protecting a hardware monopoly.
Which brings us back to Modular. How does a $4 billion software acquisition break that monopoly?
Modular is building what is essentially a universal translator. It's an advanced compiler technology. Without getting too bogged down in the computer science, compilers translate human-readable code into the machine-level instructions that the physical chip actually understands. Modular's goal is to allow AI models and developer code to run across different types of chips, whether it's an NVIDIA GPU, a Google TPU, or an upcoming Qualcomm AI accelerator, without forcing the developers to rewrite their entire code base.
It's a bridge. It intercepts the code you wrote for NVIDIA and quietly translates it so it runs perfectly on Qualcomm's hardware.
That's the promise. If Modular works flawlessly, it commoditizes the hardware layer. Suddenly, developers don't care whose logo is stamped on the silicon because the software bridge handles the complexity.
That was just huge.
Qualcomm dropping $4 billion on this shows that the power struggle isn't just about who can print the fastest silicon anymore. The war has expanded into compilers, into developer interfaces, and into breaking the psychological lock-in of the engineering workforce.
It's a brilliant strategic play. If you can't beat them in the fabrication plant, you attack them in the software compiler. But if we step back from the billionaires and the chip makers fighting over sovereign-level financing and software moats, we have to ask a much more grounded question. Who is actually feeling the immediate cost of this empire?
Yeah, the real-world impact.
And who is out there right now physically teaching these machines how to exist in our world? This is where the story shifts from the data center to the living room.
Yep.
If we look at the corporate leaders navigating this, Tim Cook rose on the influence board this week, and Satya Nadella at Microsoft is holding steady.
That's right.
And it all ties directly back to what we talked about at the very top of this deep dive, the infrastructure confession.
Yes, the price hikes. We started with the MacBook, but let's look at the actual numbers. Apple officially bumped the price of the 512-gigabyte MacBook Air from $1,099 to $1,299.
That's a big jump.
The 1 terabyte MacBook Pro jumped from $1,699 to $1,999. It's a steep, noticeable increase across the board.
And it's not an isolated Apple phenomena. The Xbox division at Microsoft quietly raised console prices by $100 to $150, depending on the model. And what's fascinating is that Microsoft didn't hide behind generic supply chain issues. They actually pointed directly at the underlying cause.
They confess that fundamental storage and memory prices have already risen more than 2.5 times in recent months.
2.5 times.
And even more alarming, they warned investors and consumers that those costs could double again by the fall of 2027.
That is a staggering statistic. A 2.5x increase in the fundamental building blocks of consumer electronics. This is what I meant when I said the data center didn't stay in the desert.
Right.
We have this collective mental image of AI server farms out in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by solar panels, humming away, completely disconnected from our daily lives. But the AI memory market is so ravenous, so entirely insatiable, that it is actively starving the consumer electronics market.
You have to look at this through the lens of zero-sum physical manufacturing. There is only so much fabrication capacity on planet Earth. The massive silicon foundries, like TSMC or Samsung, only have a finite number of machines capable of printing high-end wafers.
Right, you can't just spin up a new factory overnight. It takes years and billions of dollars.
Exactly. So if you are a foundry and NVIDIA is banging down your door offering massive premiums to manufacture high-bandwidth memory for their AI clusters, what do?
You take the deal.
You take the deal, you reallocate your production lines, you stop making the cheap standard NAND flash storage and standard DRAM memory that goes into iPads, Xboxes, and budget laptops. You pivot everything toward the high-margin AI components.
And as a result, the supply of consumer memory plummets and the price skyrockets. The exact same foundational silicon that feeds a frontier AI model analyzing a genome is now reaching directly into your family living room and making the device sitting under your television significantly more expensive.
The consumer is now directly, involuntarily subsidizing the AI build-out through inflation on personal devices. The cost of the intelligence revolution is being baked into the retail price of consumer tech.
It's the most relatable, immediate human impact of the week. But there is another deeply human story playing out right now, and it's happening far from the sleek aisles of the Apple Store.
Yeah, this one is fascinating.
It's happening in homes and factories across India.
Yeah.
And when I read the details of this and the sources, this one honestly gave me pause. It felt profoundly different from the usual tech narrative.
You're referring to the surge in egocentric data harvesting.
Yes. The reports describe this incredibly vivid, almost surreal scene. Right now, thousands of workers in India are being contracted to strap body-mounted camera rigs to themselves, sometimes head-mounted, sometimes chest-mounted, and film their daily, ordinary physical tasks.
Just daily life stuff.
Yeah. They are filming themselves slicing a mango, folding a towel, wiping down a kitchen counter, sorting cardboard boxes in a warehouse. They do it over and over again, capturing the exact physical sequence of mundane human chores.
This is the raw material required to build a nervous system for physical AI. For years, the public narrative assumed that robots were being trained by PhD engineers in pristine, sterile laboratories.
Right, the guys in the white coats.
But it turns out, if you want a humanoid robot to actually learn how to navigate the chaotic, messy reality of human spaces, you can't just program it with code.
Because the real world doesn't run on clean code. It runs on friction, gravity, and unexpected obstacles.
Right. It relies on what roboticists call egocentric data, which is first-person perspective footage of a human executing the task. The AI models need to see the world exactly as the robot will see it.
Let me stop you there, because I know people are wondering, why can't the AI companies just scrape YouTube? There are billions of hours of video on YouTube of people cooking, cleaning, building things. Why do they need to hire people in India to strap cameras to their heads?
It's a great question, and it comes down to physics and perspective. A YouTube video is usually filmed from a third-person perspective. A camera on a tripod watching a chef.
Okay.
The AI can watch that and understand what is happening. A person is chopping an onion, But it doesn't capture how it's happening from a sensory level. It doesn't capture the depths, the occlusion, the exact angle of the wrist, or the spatial relationship between the eyes and the hands.
It lacks the proprioceptive context.
Exactly. When you strap a camera to a human's chest, the camera moves with their torso. It captures the subtle hesitations, the adjustments for weight and friction. The human body literally becomes the sensor array. The human becomes the data set.
Wow. As I was reading this, I kept thinking of these workers as the ghostwriters of the physical world.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
There is this profound, almost uncomfortable intimacy to it. Imagine a person standing in their own kitchen, folding a towel. The specific gesture they use, the arc of their arm, the pressure of their fingers as they pinch the fabric, that incredibly personal human movement is recorded, digitized, and becomes an instruction set downloaded into a machine halfway across the world.
It highlights a massive contradiction in the overarching AI narrative. The tech empire constantly preaches the gospel of autonomy. We hear endless hype about autonomous agents, autonomous humanoid robots, systems that can just magically figure things out on their own. But scenes like this prove that autonomy has teachers.
And those teachers aren't elite computer scientists in Silicon Valley. They are everyday people doing incredibly mundane, repetitive tasks, often for very small financial payments, who are completely removed from the billions of dollars of corporate value those models will eventually generate.
The kitchen becomes a laboratory. The homemaker becomes a highly specific data point. It's a stark reminder that behind every magical autonomous backflip on a pristine corporate demo stage, there are thousands of hours of human labor, human repetition, and human physicality silently feeding the machine's understanding of our world.
That transition from the human movement to the machine mind is fascinating.
Yeah.
But those human movements, once digitized, eventually has to be downloaded into physical machines.
Right.
And those machines, whether they are servers in a data center or humanoid robots walking across a factory floor, require a totally different kind of hardware architecture to actually survive and function.
That's the next layer of the problem.
Which shifts the focus of the drama this week to the physical machines themselves. Because if you're building a nervous system for an AI, the processor isn't enough. You need memory. And this week, the hierarchy of the global memory market completely inverted. SK Hynix officially took the high bandwidth memory, or HBM, crown away from Samsung.
And that is a seismic shift in the Asian tech sector. For decades, Samsung has treated dominance in the memory market as their absolute birthright. They were the undisputed monarchs of Korean technology. But memory used to be a very different kind of business. Historically, it was a cyclical, boom and bust commodity market.
Right, I remember this cycle well. It was pure supply and demand economics.
Exactly. A company like Samsung would build massive factories and overproduce DRAM chips. The market would flood, prices would crash to rock bottom, profits would evaporate, so they would stop building factories.
Yeah.
Then 2 years later, a shortage would hit, prices would spike, they'd make a fortune, and the cycle would repeat. It was a commodity, no different from copper or timber. But the AI revolution has fundamentally altered the physics of that market. AI has made specific types of memory strategically vital.
Because of HBM, let's explain what high bandwidth memory actually is, physically, and why it is the ultimate bottleneck in the AI race. Why is it so different from the RAM sitting inside my laptop?
To understand HBM, you have to look at the physical architecture of an AI processor. When an NVIDIA GPU is training a model, it is processing astronomical amounts of mathematical data simultaneously. But the processor itself can only work as fast as the data is fed to it.
Cool.
If the memory chips holding the data are too far away, or the connection isn't wide enough, the processor sits idle, waiting. This is known in computer science as the von Neumann bottleneck, or the memory wall.
So you have this incredibly expensive, brilliant intelligence machine, but it's starving because the waiter can't bring the food out of the kitchen fast enough.
That's a great way to visualize it. So engineers realized they had to move the memory closer to the processor. And I mean physically closer, down to the millimeter. HBM solves this by taking multiple memory chips and stacking them vertically, like a microscopic stack of pancakes.
Okay, pancakes.
Then they drill thousands of microscopic holes vertically through the silicon chips, these are called through silicon vias or TSVs, and run tiny wires through them.
Wait, literally drilling holes to the chips. That sounds insanely difficult to manufacture.
It is incredibly difficult. It requires packaging precision at the atomic level. But the result is that instead of a narrow, slow highway connecting the memory to the processor, You have a massive 24-bit wide superhighway sitting right next to the GPU core. The data moves instantly. If a GPU doesn't have HBM bolted next to it, it is essentially useless for frontier AI work.
And because of that physical bottleneck, the memory supplier is no longer just a vendor selling a cheap commodity. They hold the keys to the entire operation. SK Hynix figured out how to manufacture this complex vertical stack better and faster than Samsung.
And as a result, they aren't just a supplier, they are acting like a weapons manufacturer in wartime. Everyone needs exactly what they have, and there is no substitute available.
Wow.
Micron, another massive memory manufacturer, also proved this dynamic this week by announcing they've secured billions of dollars in long-term AI supply commitments. They are locking in the future of the industry.
Securing the supply chain.
The GPU gets all the celebrity treatment, Jensen Huang in his leather jacket, the massive keynote presentations. But it's the quiet, complex memory contract sitting on the table that actually dictates what the next generation of artificial intelligence is going to cost to run.
So we have the specialized chips, we have the stacked, vertically integrated memory. Now you need a physical place to put all this hardware. You need the machine room, you need power, cooling, and security. And this leads us to, arguably, the strangest scene of the week, courtesy of Elon Musk.
Yeah, this was a surprise.
Musk is sitting at number 3 on the influence hierarchy this week, but not because of a new car or a rocket launch. SpaceX, a company whose explicit stated mission is to colonize Mars, just signed a massive computing deal to act as a commercial landlord for AI startups on Earth.
It is a remarkable pivot. They signed a massive lease deal with Reflection AI, which is an open-weight artificial intelligence startup. Reflection isn't buying rockets. They are leasing access to advanced NVIDIA GB300 server systems that are part of SpaceX's massive Colossus II data center build-out.
And the financial numbers attached to this are staggering.
Yeah, it's reported at $150 million per month, potentially reaching up to $6.3 billion by the year 2029.
I just want to sit with the sheer bizarre nature of that juxtaposition. A company built with the explicit engineering goal of leaving the planet is now renting out the servers that train artificial intelligence on the planet.
Right.
Reflection AI didn't buy a payload slot on a Falcon 9 rocket. They bought time inside Elon Musk's liquid-cooled machine room. Why is SpaceX doing this?
If you zoom out and look at Musk's broader strategy across his entire portfolio of companies, it actually makes perfect logical sense. His entire business philosophy over the last decade has been built on the concept of infrastructure as leverage.
Right, if you control the base layer, you control the ecosystem.
Exactly. Look at his other ventures. SpaceX controls launch capacity. If you want to put a satellite in orbit cheaply, you have to use his rockets. That's leverage. Starlink controls low Earth orbit internet communications. Tesla's supercharger network became the de facto standard for electric vehicle charging in North America. That is energy leverage.
And now,
Massive, multi-gigawatt, liquid-cooled GPU clusters are the new infrastructure leverage.
it's a fascinating shift in the tech ecosystem. In the old era of software, if you were a scrappy startup with a good idea, you just swiped a credit card, rented some basic cloud servers from Amazon Web Services, and scaled your app.
Yeah, it was easy.
But today, if you are an AI company with ambitions to build a frontier model, renting compute isn't just an operational expense. It is literally a matter of survival. You need sovereign-level industrial-scale infrastructure. You need massive power substations and advanced cooling loops. And Musk realized he has the engineering teams and the real estate to build exactly that.
It's also worth noting, by the way, that Jeff Bezos dropped significantly on the influence board this week, falling to number 9.
Oh, really?
Yeah, precisely because Amazon's traditional cloud infrastructure play was unusually quiet while Musk and SpaceX were making these massive aggressive moves into high-end compute leasing.
So the hyperscale infrastructure is expanding, the compute is being leased out for billions of dollars, and the custom silicon is being wired up. But what happens when that intelligence finally steps out of the server rack and into a physical body?
The robots.
This gives us our robot moment of the week. Agility Robotics, the company that builds the bipedal humanoid robot called Digit, officially announced plans for a SPAC public offering.
They are targeting a valuation of $2.5 billion and hoping to raise over $620 million in public capital. And honestly, looking at the history of hardware startups, this is the most brutal, unforgiving test a robotics company can face.
Because Wall Street does not care about your viral YouTube video.
They really don't. And robotics companies have historically relied on those videos. A 30-second highly edited clip of a robot doing a backflip, or carefully placing a cardboard box on a shelf while upbeat music plays gets you tens of millions of views. It gets you venture capital funding.
But public markets ask entirely different, much uglier questions.
Right. Venture capitalists ask, what is the future potential? Public market analysts ask, what are your gross margins this quarter? They ask about deployment costs. They ask about mean time between failures. They ask about unit economics.
Like if Digit drops a box in a real-world warehouse in Ohio, how much does it cost to send a human technician out to recalibrate it? How much does the replacement joint cost?
Exactly. Now, to Agility's credit, Digit is not just a lab experiment anymore. They are already deployed in actual messy customer sites, places like Toyota manufacturing plants, GXO logistics warehouses, and Mercado Libre fulfillment centers. They are out of the lab and doing real work.
Which is a huge milestone.
Yeah. But surviving quarterly earnings calls, where analysts tear apart your maintenance contracts and hardware degradation rates, is a profoundly harder test than surviving a controlled demo day. The robot didn't just enter the warehouse this week. It entered the ticker tape.
And that transition from the controlled laboratory to the chaotic real world, whether it's a physical robot in a warehouse or an AI model deployed on a network, is exactly what is terrifying governments globally right now. Because the hardware is scaling, the robots are walking, but the software running on them. The frontier models themselves have become so incredibly powerful and so unpredictable that they are triggering international alarms at the highest levels of national security.
Yeah, the tone has definitely shifted.
Which brings us to the twist in this week's drama, the deeper meaning that reshapes the entire board.
We are seeing the realization in real time that frontier AI models are no longer being treated as consumer software products. They're being classified and treated as strategic, dual-use national infrastructure. Let's look closely at what the sources call Washington's release gate.
Right. And as we always do, we are analyzing this purely through the structural lens of power, supply chain mechanics, and policy shifts, without taking any political sides. The mechanics of what happened are what's fascinating.
Okay.
According to the reports, the incoming Trump administration has asked OpenAI to limit early access to their upcoming GPT 5.6 model. They want to keep it restricted to government-approved partners and security agencies before any broader public launch.
That's a big ask.
Meanwhile, Meta, with Mark Zuckerberg rising on the influence board, was pressed to submit their open-weight models for voluntary federal review.
This represents a massive fundamental paradigm shift in how the state regulates technology. For the last 30 years, the government playbook for tech regulation was entirely reactive, what lawyers call ex post regulation.
Right. A tech company ships a product, say, a social media network. It scales globally, it breaks something in society, it causes a scandal. The government waits a year, holds a highly publicized congressional hearing where politicians yell at a CEO, and maybe, eventually, they write a regulatory framework, they react after the release.
But with frontier artificial intelligence, the state is shifting to an ex-ante posture. Proactive. They want a pre-launch security checkpoint. They want to be in the room while the plane is still boarding before it ever takes off. And when you understand the capabilities of these new models, that anxiety makes logical sense.
Because no one asks the developer of a new photo-sharing app or a food delivery service to undergo a national security review. The stakes are too low. But frontier AI is entirely different. It sits at the intersection of code generation, biological research, advanced cybersecurity, and military logistics simultaneously. It is a general-purpose technology.
A model release is no longer just a product launch. The launch button isn't just sitting on Sam Altman's desk in San Francisco anymore. The intelligence community wants a hand hovering right next to it.
And the specific reason for this acute anxiety became crystal clear this week when you look at the warnings coming out of the global intelligence apparatus.
Yeah, that was sobering.
Yes, the Five Eyes Alliance, which is the massive intelligence sharing network comprising the US, UK, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, issued a public warning this week that honestly gave me chills when I read the timeline.
They stated, on the record, that advanced AI cyber risk is no longer a theoretical problem for the future. It is not years away. It is months away.
Months. And I want to be clear about what they're afraid of. I think a lot of people hear AI cyber threat and they imagine some sci-fi Terminator scenario where a sentient AI spontaneously decides to hack the Pentagon and launch missiles. That is not the immediate threat. The immediate terrifying threat is compression.
Exactly. Time and skill compression. These powerful reasoning models can compress the skill, the speed, and the scale required to execute devastating, coordinated cyber attacks.
Let's break down the mechanics of that. How does an AI actually threaten a network differently than a human hacker?
It lowers the barrier to entry while dramatically increasing the speed of execution. Think about global infrastructure, water treatment plants, electrical grids, hospital databases. A terrifying amount of that infrastructure is built on legacy code, old systems that haven't been patched or updated in years.
Right, the classic, if it ain't broke, don't fix it IT mentality.
Exactly. Historically, finding a vulnerability in those old systems, a zero-day exploit, required a highly skilled human hacker or a state-sponsored team to spend months painstakingly analyzing the code, searching for a tiny flaw, and writing a custom exploit to take advantage of it. It was artisanal work.
Slow and deliberate.
But an advanced AI agent can automate that entire process through a technique called fuzzing. It can ingest millions of lines of legacy codebase, analyze it for logical flaws, find the vulnerabilities, write the exploit chains, and coordinate a multi-pronged attack in a fraction of the time it would take a human. It turns a months-long artisanal hacking operation into an automated push-button process. Every unpatched server on Earth suddenly looks like a door with the lock left half open, and the AI is capable of jiggling every single handle simultaneously.
It's an incredibly uncomfortable symmetry, because the exact same AI capability that helps a cyber defender rapidly audit a code base and patch a vulnerable system is the exact same capability that helps a malicious attacker probe it. The same autonomous agent that can intelligently debug your code can be inverted and used as a weapon against it. It is inherently dual use.
So the question is, how are the AI labs responding to this reality? They know what they are building.
They are scrambling to build containment structures. OpenAI launched initiatives like Daybreak and Patch the Planet, which aim to use their own AI models to proactively help open-source maintainers find and fix bugs before attackers can exploit them.
It's a race between automated defense and automated offense.
But it was Google DeepMind that really captured the necessary philosophical shift this week with the publication of their AI control roadmap.
I read that roadmap, and I loved the central analogy they used.
It's a brilliant framework.
Yeah.
DeepMind laid out a defense-in-depth approach for dealing with advanced agentic AI. They are basically arguing that we have to treat our own internal AI systems as if they could become misaligned tomorrow, or as if they could act like malicious insider threats.
And to explain how to manage that risk, they used a very practical, grounded metaphor, a driving instructor with dual controls.
Right. It's not some high-minded, abstract, philosophical debate about the nature of consciousness or vague concepts of AI alignment. It's incredibly practical. It's a physical brake pedal. It's the simple acknowledgement that when you put a learner driver behind the wheel of a massive, powerful machine, you don't just blindly trust them to figure it out.
You can't. The stakes are too high.
Exactly. You sit next to them, and you have a second independent brake pedal installed on the passenger side, ready to slam your foot down the second they veer toward oncoming traffic. DeepMind is saying that AI agents need those dual controls. Trust cannot be assumed. It has to be earned step by step, operation by operation, with a human or a separate monitoring system always holding a veto power over the AI's actions.
The labs that are racing to build these autonomous systems are finally realizing that they also have to be the ones to build the heavy-duty cryptographic locks to contain them.
But speaking of trust, locks, and containment, we have to talk about Dario Amodei at Anthropic, who is holding steady near the top of the influence hierarchy this week.
Right.
Because while everyone else was worrying about theoretical future cyber attacks, Anthropic uncovered what might be the largest, most aggressive AI model extraction campaign we've seen yet in the real world.
This is a wild story, and it gets right to the heart of the intellectual property wars. Anthropic publicly accused operators linked to the Chinese tech giant Alibaba of carrying out a massive, coordinated extraction campaign against their frontier model.
The scale is unbelievable.
They identified an orchestrated network of nearly 25,000 separate accounts that generated an astounding 28.8 million interactions with their Claude model over just a few months.
And the purpose of those 28.8 million interactions wasn't just casual conversation. They weren't asking Claude to write emails or summarize articles. It was a highly sophisticated process called model distillation.
Yep.
They were deliberately taking Claude's highest quality, most complex outputs and using them as a synthetic data set to train or improve a competing, cheaper system.
Okay, let me push back on this because I think a lot of people might hear this and think, wait, isn't that just web scraping? Tech companies, including Anthropic, scrape data from the public web all the time to train their models. How is this legally or morally different from a search engine indexing a website or an AI reading Wikipedia?
It is fundamentally mechanically different because of the nature of what is being extracted. When you scrape Wikipedia, you are scraping static text. You are scraping established public facts. But what these operators were doing was extracting expensive, complex behavior.
Behavior. Explain how you extract a behavior from an API.
Let's go back to the economics we discussed earlier. Anthropic spent billions of dollars on compute, data curation, and human feedback to teach Claude how to reason, how to break down a complex coding problem, how to engage in long-range planning, how to structure an agentic workflow. That reasoning capability is the secret sauce.
Right.
What the Alibaba-linked operators did was systematically query Claude with incredibly difficult, complex logic puzzles and coding tasks. They forced Claude to show its work, to generate step-by-step chain-of-thought reasoning. Then, they recorded those brilliant billions of dollars in the making answers. If you do that 28 million times, you generate a massive data set of perfect logical reasoning.
I see. And then you take that data set and you feed it into your own smaller, cheaper AI model.
Exactly. You bypass the billions of dollars of fundamental R&D. You don't have to figure out how to teach a model to be smart. You just use Claude as a free, highly skilled tutor. The smaller model studies Claude's answers and essentially clones its behavior. Anthropic views this as industrial espionage by API.
Industrial espionage by API. That is a brilliant and terrifying way to frame it. The competitor didn't have to hack into Anthropic servers and steal the proprietary source code. They didn't have to smuggle out a hard drive with the model weights. They just knocked on the front door 28 million times, asked really smart questions, and wrote down the answers.
And it highlights this incredible, almost impossible tightrope that Dario Amodei and other AI CEOs have to walk right now. The business model demands openness. On one hand, Anthropic needs massive scale to survive. They need massive enterprise customers to integrate Claude deeply into their corporate workflows. They need millions of individual developers using the API to generate revenue. They have to leave the door open.
But on the other hand, if that door is too open, if the API lacks strict behavioral monitoring, Claude literally becomes the free training fuel for every well-funded, state-backed rival on the planet. They are essentially subsidizing their own competitors' research and development.
The scene itself is almost banal if you picture it. Somewhere, a server is just generating text on a screen, millions of times over. But when you aggregate that text, when you count those 28.8 million perfectly reasoned answers, it ceases to be text. It becomes a ladder. Claude just dutifully answered the prompts it was given, and Anthropic is realizing that those answers helped a massive global competitor climb significantly closer to the frontier of intelligence without paying the toll.
It all comes back to control and cost. All of these seemingly disparate threads we've pulled on today, the intelligence agencies warning about cyber timelines compressing, the frantic multi-billion-dollar race for custom inference chips, the intricate physics of memory bottlenecks, the price tags quietly jumping at the Apple Store, the data extraction campaigns happening through open APIs, they are not isolated events.
No, they're not.
They are symptoms of the exact same underlying pressure, and they all lead us to one undeniable conclusion about where we stand today.
If you synthesize the journey we've taken today, you are watching the rapid, brutal evolution of an entire global industry in real time. Think about how fast this has moved. Just a few years ago, this all started as a whimsical story about software magic chatbots writing funny poems or generating surreal images. Then, almost overnight, it evolved into a high-stakes, multi-billion-dollar model race between a few elite labs.
That software race immediately triggered a desperate global chip race, which morphed into a frantic, concrete-pouring data center race. But the drama we decoded this week proves that we've crossed a new threshold entirely. The foundational era is over. The era of physical consequences has begun.
The AI empire is no longer hidden behind the comfortable, abstract metaphor of the cloud. We loved the cloud because it felt invisible. It felt frictionless and infinite. But this week proved definitively that the empire has weight. It has gravity. It has physical shelves in retail stores. It has invoices. It has massive multi-billion-dollar bond sales dictating terms in the global credit markets. It has national security gates and intelligence checkpoints. And perhaps most profoundly, it has human teachers wearing cameras in their kitchens, quietly feeding the machine their movements.
So the ultimate question for the future, and the thought we want to leave you with as you watch this tech landscape shift around you, isn't just about who can build the biggest GPU cluster or who can secure the most raw compute power.
The real questions are physical, economic, and deeply human. Who ultimately pays the inflated price tag for this infrastructure? Who controls the custom metal that processes our thoughts? Who is allowed to copy the machine's behavior? Who holds the veto power over the launch button? And most humanly of all. When the autonomous future finally arrives, who is left folding the towels for the machine?
See you next week when the next piece of the AI empire moves on the board.
Silicon drama continues.